Lyra looked down at the dusty streets of the alien city, her heart heavy with worry. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the tall buildings, but to her, the day felt cold. The constant rush of people moving past her reminded her of her failure, her struggle to make a life for herself and her young child. The life she had once known, full of dreams and warmth, had shattered the day her husband had died. Now, she was alone in a world that didn't care. She tightened her grip on the strap of her worn bag, the one she'd carried everywhere since she arrived on this foreign planet. The other aliens passed by without a glance, too busy with their own lives to spare a second for her. But it wasn't their fault. Lyra had always been an outsider. Her kind, with their silver skin and wide eyes, had never been welcomed here. Even now, her heart ached for her child, Ari, a boy too young to understand the cruelty of the world, but old enough to feel the hunger in his stomach. He deserved better. Lyra had spent weeks knocking on doors, begging for work. She had skills that she knew could be useful to others. She had been trained as an engineer back home, designing machines and systems that made life easier for her people. But here, her skills didn't matter. She was an alien, an outcast. No one cared about her qualifications. They only saw her race. Her last interview had been a disaster. The human employer had barely looked at her before rejecting her. His words echoed in her mind, cold and dismissive. "Sorry, but we don't hire your kind here." She had left the office that day feeling like a failure, knowing that she would never be able to provide a decent life for Ari. But today was different. Today, she had heard rumors of a human-run company, a company that was said to offer opportunities to those in need, no matter their background. Lyra wasn't sure if the rumors were true, but she had nothing left to lose. She had to try. For Ari. As she walked toward the company's building, the weight of her steps grew heavier with each passing moment. She was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally, but she pushed forward, determined. The tall building in front of her loomed like a mountain, its sleek surface reflecting the light in a way that made it look almost unapproachable. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't stop. She couldn't, not for herself and certainly not for Ari. Inside, the building smelled of clean air and polished wood. The receptionist, a young human woman, looked up from her desk as Lyra entered. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "How can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice soft but professional. I'm here for a job," Lyra said, her voice shaky. She had practiced the words in her head countless times, but now they felt foreign. She didn't even know what job she was asking for. She just needed something, anything, that would allow her to take care of her child. The receptionist studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Please wait here. I'll let Mr. Hall know you're here." Lyra took a seat in the waiting area, her hands trembling in her lap. She tried to steady her breath to calm the racing thoughts in her mind. What if they rejected her too? What if they saw her and decided that she didn't belong? It seemed like every door she had knocked on had been slammed in her face. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours before the receptionist returned. "Mr. Hall will see you now," she said, her voice still polite but carrying a note of hesitation. Lyra nodded and stood, her legs feeling weak beneath her. She followed the receptionist down a long hallway, the walls lined with sleek modern artwork and glass windows that looked out onto the bustling streets below. They stopped in front of a large wooden door, which the receptionist knocked on lightly before opening it. Inside, a man sat behind a desk, scribbling notes onto a datapad. He didn't look up as they entered, and for a moment, Lyra wondered if she had made a mistake. He seemed too busy for someone like her. The receptionist spoke again, breaking the silence. "Mr. Hall, this is Lyra. She's here for the position." The man, Mr. Hall, finally looked up. He had short dark hair and a stern expression, but there was something in his eyes, something that seemed almost tired. He studied Lyra for a moment before gesturing to the chair across from him. "Please sit." Lyra sat down slowly, unsure of what to say next. Mr. Hall's gaze didn't leave her face as he spoke. "What is it that you want? Why should I hire you?" Lyra took a deep breath, feeling her pulse quicken. This was the moment she couldn't afford to fail. "I need a job," she said, her voice steady but desperate. "I have experience, skills that can help your company. I can work hard, and I will do whatever it takes. I just need a chance." Mr. Hall's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment Lyra thought he would send her away just like the others. But then his expression softened, just a little. He sighed and leaned back, in his chair. "You're asking for something that's not easy to give," he said, his voice low. "I'm sure you've heard the rumors about how we treat employees like you." Lyra nodded, her heart sinking. She knew what he was referring to. The company had a reputation for being hard on those they hired, especially those from marginalized groups, but she had no choice. "I understand," she said quietly. "But I'm not asking for special treatment. I just need a chance to prove myself." There was a long silence as Mr. Hall studied her, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. Finally, he spoke. "I'll give you a trial period. 1 week. If you can prove yourself, maybe we can work something out." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. This was it, her chance. She nodded eagerly, her voice almost a whisper. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." Mr. Hall gave her a sharp look. "We'll see. But I'm not going to make it easy." Lyra stood and bowed her head, her gratitude overwhelming. "I understand," she said, her voice full of determination. "Thank you again." As she left the office, her heart pounded in her chest. This was her last hope. If she couldn't make it here, she didn't know what she would do next. But for the first time in weeks, Lyra allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Lyra walked out of Mr. Hall's office with her heart racing. She had done it. She had secured a trial period at the company. But as the door clicked shut behind her, the weight of the promise she had made began to sink in. 1 week, she thought. 1 week to prove that I'm worth something. 1 week to show that I can make a difference. She paused in the hallway, taking a deep breath. It wasn't just her future on the line. It was Ari's too. If she failed, there would be no second chance. She would be back to where she started, alone, struggling with no hope in sight. But no, she couldn't think like that. She had to focus. She had to push forward. "Lyra?" The voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see the receptionist standing by the door watching her. Lyra forced a smile. "Yes?" The receptionist gave her a polite nod. "Mr. Hall wanted me to remind you to report to the training room tomorrow at 8 a.m. They'll get you started with the basics." "Thank you," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the nerves in her chest. She nodded at the receptionist before walking out of the building, her footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. Once outside, Lyra felt the cool breeze against her face, and for a moment she let herself relax. The city around her was alive, bustling with energy. But in this moment, it felt like the world had slowed down. She had a chance. Just a small chance. But it was something. When she arrived at her small apartment, Ari was waiting by the door, his big eyes lighting up as she entered. He ran over to her and hugged her tightly. Mama, did you find a job?" Ari's voice was full of hope, and Lyra's heart ached at the innocence in his words. He didn't know how hard things were for them. He didn't understand how desperate she had become, how each day felt like a battle just to get through. But in that moment, looking at his face, she couldn't help but smile. "Yes, my little star," Lyra said softly. "I found a job." Ari's face lit up. "Really? You're going to work? What will you do?" Lyra knelt down to his level and hugged him again. "I'm going to work hard to make sure we have everything we need, and I'll be home every night to take care of you." The warmth in his embrace filled her with a sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to get better. The next morning, Lyra awoke early. the excitement and fear keeping her from sleeping for long. She quickly got dressed in the best clothes she had, simple but clean, and made sure Ari was ready for school before leaving. Her heart pounded as she walked back to the company, the familiar feeling of uncertainty returning. When she arrived, the receptionist led her to the training room. It was a large, modern space filled with desks and computers where other employees were already seated and working. Lyra felt a wave of anxiety rush over her, but she quickly pushed it aside. This was her chance, and she couldn't let it slip away. The head trainer, a tall human woman named Clara, walked up to her. "You must be Lyra," she said, offering a smile that was both professional and kind. "Welcome. We'll get you settled in. Just follow the instructions on the screen and we'll get you up to speed." Lyra nodded, her nerves easing a little at Clara's friendly demeanor. She sat down at one of the empty desks, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The screen blinked to life, displaying a series of instructions on how to use the company's internal systems. They were unfamiliar, and Lyra felt a momentary panic. She had worked with machines and technology before, but this was different. This was human technology, and she wasn't sure how to navigate it. But then she reminded herself. 1 week. She had 1 week to learn everything she could. The first few hours were difficult. She stumbled through the tasks, trying to figure out the strange buttons and systems. Some of the humans around her whispered and cast doubtful glances her way. Lyra could feel their eyes on her, but she ignored them. She couldn't let their judgment hold her back. As the day went on, she started to pick up the basics. Slowly, the systems began to make sense, and Lyra felt her confidence building. She had always been a quick learner, and her experience with engineering back home helped her understand the logic behind the tasks. She wasn't just struggling anymore. She was moving forward. By lunchtime, Lyra was exhausted but proud of herself. She had managed to complete most of the tasks given to her, and although there were still some things she didn't understand, she had made progress. Her stomach growled as she sat down at the break table, but she pushed the hunger aside. There would be time to eat later. As she sat in silence, trying to gather her thoughts, one of her colleagues approached her. A human woman, tall with short, brown hair and a friendly face, sat down next to her. "Hey," the woman said, offering a smile. "I'm Jenna. How's your first day going?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before responding. It's going well, I think. There's a lot to learn, but I'll get there." Jenna nodded. "Yeah, it's a lot at first, but don't worry. We all had to learn it at some point. You'll get the hang of it." Lyra smiled gratefully. "Thanks. I really need to make this work." Jenna studied her for a moment, then spoke again, her voice quieter. "I know what it's like. When I first started, I was in a situation similar to yours. It's tough, but you've got this. Just keep your head down, work hard, and you'll earn respect here." Lyra blinked, surprised by Jenna's kindness. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." Jenna smiled again. "You're welcome. If you need help, just let me know." The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks and instructions. By the time the clock struck 5, Lyra was mentally exhausted but satisfied. She had made it through her first day, and it hadn't been as bad as she feared. In fact, it had been a small victory. As she left the building, the evening air was cooler than before. Lyra's steps were slower now, but there was a lightness in her heart. She had done it. She had made it through her first day. And tomorrow she would do it all over again, ready to prove that she belonged. When she returned home, Ari was waiting for her, his little face lighting up at the sight of her. "How was your first day, Mama?" he asked, his voice full of excitement. Lyra crouched down to his level, smiling. "It was hard, but I made it, and I'm going to keep going no matter what." Ari hugged her tightly. "I knew you could do it, Mama." Lyra hugged him back, feeling a warmth in her chest. She was doing this for him, and no matter how difficult things got, she wouldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. The days passed quickly, and each one brought new challenges for Lyra. Her second week at the company was just as difficult as the first, if not more so. The tasks were becoming more complex, and the systems, though they made sense to her now, still felt overwhelming at times. But she couldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. By the third day, Lyra had learned the basics of the company's internal software, but there was so much more to absorb. She spent every break studying the manuals, asking questions when she needed to, and practicing the skills she had learned. Her fingers moved more confidently over the keyboard, and the panic she once felt at each new task began to fade. She was getting better, but even as Lyra worked tirelessly, she could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her. Some of them still seemed skeptical. They would glance at her when she made a mistake, whispering among themselves when she wasn't looking. She had always known that being an outsider would be hard, but the judgment stung, especially since it wasn't just her work ethic they doubted. It was her very presence. It was on the 5th day that Lyra faced her first real test. The system crashed. The entire network went down, and the employees were scrambling to fix it. Lyra had been in the middle of a task when the system malfunctioned, and she watched in panic as her colleagues rushed to their terminals. Clara, the head trainer, barked orders at everyone, telling them to restore the network. Lyra stood frozen, unsure of what to do. She wasn't part of the team that handled technical issues like this. Her job was more basic, simple tasks, entering data, organizing files. But in that moment she realized something. She had worked with systems before. Back home she had been trained to fix things when they broke. She wasn't just an assistant, she was an engineer. Her hands moved without thinking, reaching for the console in front of her. She quickly started typing commands, accessing the backup systems. The other employees were still in a frenzy, unaware that she had even started. She pushed aside the nervousness building in her chest, focused only on the task at hand. Minutes passed, but to Lyra, it felt like hours. The hum of the computers and the frantic voices around her faded away. It was just her and the problem in front of her. And then, with a final click of a button, the system came back online. The screen blinked to life and Lyra exhaled in relief. Clara rushed over, her eyes wide. "You did it," she said, her voice full of surprise. "How did you—" I've worked with systems before," Lyra said, her voice shaking slightly. "I knew what to do." Clara stared at her for a moment, clearly taken aback. "Well, it's lucky you were here. We would have lost a lot of data if you hadn't fixed it." Lyra didn't respond, still trying to catch her breath. She had done it. She had fixed the problem. But the eyes of her colleagues were on her now, and she could feel the weight of their judgment lifting slightly. For the first time since she started, she felt like she belonged, like she had earned her place here. After that, things changed. Her colleagues began to treat her differently. They still didn't speak to her much, but they no longer whispered behind her back. Some of them even nodded at her when they passed, acknowledging her efforts. Lyra didn't need much, just a small recognition that she wasn't invisible. It was enough. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult task, Lyra found herself sitting alone in the break room, sipping a cup of water. She was tired, exhausted really, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't let up, not now, not when things were starting to get better. "You did good today," a voice said, and Lyra looked up to see Jenna standing there, a small smile on her face. Lyra smiled back, though her exhaustion was evident. "Thanks. It wasn't easy." Jenna pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "I know, but you're doing it. I've been watching you. You're learning faster than I did when I first started." Lyra blinked, surprised. "Really?" Jenna nodded. "Yeah, people are starting to notice. Clara's been talking about you." Clara, the head trainer who had been so distant at first, now seemed to be paying attention to Lyra in a way she hadn't before. Lyra didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but she couldn't deny that it made her feel a little better. "I just want to prove I can do it," Lyra said quietly, looking down at her cup. "I want to show that I'm not just some outsider, that I'm worth something." Jenna's expression softened. "You're more than worth something, Lyra. You've already shown you're smarter than half the people here. Just keep going." Lyra smiled faintly, grateful for Jenna's support. She hadn't expected it, especially not from someone who had been here longer than she had. But Jenna had been kind from the start, even when others hadn't been. The rest of the day went by in a blur. Lyra finished her tasks quickly as she had learned to do and stayed late to finish up some extra work. As she packed her things, Clara approached her. "Lyra," Clara said, her tone serious, "I need to talk to you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had been doing everything right, hadn't she? She couldn't afford to mess this up now. Clara led her to a quiet corner of the building, away from the prying eyes of the other employees. "I've been watching you," she said, her voice low, "and I'm impressed. You've got a lot of potential." Lyra felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you. But," Clara hesitated, "I need you to understand something. We're not going to go easy on you. This is a trial and it's not over yet. There are people here who don't think you belong. People who might try to make things harder for you." Lyra nodded, her chest tightening. She had known this. She had felt it from the beginning. But hearing Clara say it out loud made it real. "I'm not going to give up," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I'll keep proving myself. I have to." Clara studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. That's the attitude I like to see. Keep working hard, Lyra. I'll be keeping an eye on you." With that, Clara turned and walked away, leaving Lyra standing alone in the quiet hallway. She took a deep breath and walked out into the night. She was tired. So tired. But the fight wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. As she made her way home, Ari ran to greet her at the door, his face lighting up when he saw her. "How was work, Mama?" he asked, his voice full of excitement. Lyra crouched down and hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. "It was good, Ari. It was good." And though she didn't know what the future held for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to fall into place. The following days were harder than Lyra had anticipated. Though she had proven herself capable of handling the system crash, the challenges at work were far from over. Clara's words echoed in her mind. "There are people here who don't think you belong." Lyra had already felt the undercurrent of tension, but now it was undeniable. Some of her colleagues avoided eye contact. Others exchanged whispered words whenever she passed by. Yet, Lyra remained determined. She wouldn't let their judgment define her. On the 4th day of her second week, Lyra arrived at the office, early, hoping to get a head start on the day's tasks. She had learned the basics, but each task was more complicated than the last. Every day she struggled to keep up with the fast pace of the work environment. She felt the weight of her situation more than ever. If she couldn't do it, she knew she would be sent back to square one. The first task of the day was to organize the files for a major client. Lyra had been given the responsibility of handling their data, a task that was crucial to the company's success. She sat at her desk reviewing the client's information on her screen. She was doing well. Everything seemed to be in order until her computer froze. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She clicked frantically on the mouse, trying to get it to respond, but the screen remained still. Panic began to rise in her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. The work had to be done by noon. There was no time for a malfunction. She had to fix it, and fast. She glanced around the room. Clara was deep in conversation with another employee, and the others seemed busy with their own tasks. Lyra bit her lip, weighing her options. She had fixed a system crash before, but this felt different. This was her responsibility, and if she failed, she wouldn't get another chance. She took a deep breath, recalling the steps she had learned the previous week. She opened the backup system menu, typing in commands she had only half mastered. It wasn't easy, and for a moment, she wasn't sure it would work. But then, the screen blinked back to life. Lyra felt a rush of relief. She quickly resumed, her task finishing it just in time to meet the deadline. As she clicked the final button to submit the work, she looked up, only to find Clara standing in the doorway watching her. Her heart skipped a beat, but Clara simply nodded in approval. "Well done, Lyra," Clara said, her voice more approving than usual. "I saw what you did. That was impressive. Lyra couldn't help but smile, the tension in her chest loosening. Thank you, I wasn't sure I could fix it. Clara gave a small smile in return. You did. Keep it up and we'll see what happens at the end of the week. The rest of the day passed without incident. Lyra worked diligently, staying focused on the tasks at hand. But the shadow of doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She knew that her job wasn't guaranteed. She had seen how quickly things could go wrong. One mistake, and she would be back on the streets struggling once more. That evening, Lyra walked home under the dim light of the city streets, her body aching with exhaustion. Ari was waiting for her as usual, his face bright with excitement. Mama, guess what? I made a new friend at school today, Ari said, jumping up and down. His excitement was infectious, and for a moment, Lyra forgot about the weight on her shoulders. She knelt down to his level and smiled. That's wonderful, Ari. What's your new friend's name? Ashan. He's really nice, and he showed me how to make the best paper airplane. Ari grinned, his little face full of pride. Lyra laughed softly, ruffling his hair. I'm glad you're making friends, sweetie. You're growing up so fast. That night, after Ari had gone to bed, Lyra sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the pile of paperwork in front of her. She had spent hours organizing the company's files, and yet there was still so much to do. Her mind wandered back to the conversation she'd had with Clara earlier that day. Keep it up, and we'll see what happens at the end of the week. What did that mean? Was Clara's approval a sign that she was doing well, or was she simply being polite? Lyra pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford to think like that. She had to stay focused. The following morning, she arrived at work early again, determined to prove that she was capable. Her mind was set on completing the tasks without hesitation, without doubt. But as the day wore on, the pressure began to mount. The whispers from her colleagues seemed louder today. Lyra could feel the weight of their judgment, their silent disapproval. She tried to block them out, to focus only on her work, but it wasn't easy. By midday, Lyra was completely drained. The tasks were becoming harder, and the stress was starting to take its toll. She had missed a small detail in one of her reports, and Clara had pointed it out. The small mistake made Lyra feel even more vulnerable. She couldn't afford to make any more errors. She had already proven herself in some ways, but was it enough? She worked late that night, hoping to catch up on the backlog of tasks. The office was quiet, and only a few employees remained. Lyra was lost in her work when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Clara standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. You're still here? Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. You don't have to stay so late, you know. We can give you an extension if you need more time. Lyra straightened in her chair, feeling a wave of guilt wash over her. I just want to get it right. I don't want to disappoint you. Clara's expression softened and she stepped into the room. Lyra, no one expects you to be perfect. You've been working harder than anyone else here. You're doing just fine. Lyra blinked, surprised by the warmth in Clara's voice. You really think so? Clara nodded. I do. You've come a long way, and I think you're starting to earn the respect of the others. Lyra felt a sense of relief flood over her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. Thank you, she said quietly. Clara smiled. You're welcome. But don't forget to take care of yourself too. You're not alone in this. With that, Clara left and Lyra sat back in her chair, feeling both exhausted and strangely hopeful. She had worked so hard to get this far, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, for the first time in a long while, she believed that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to fall into place. The end of the week had arrived and Lyra's nerves were at an all-time high. She had made it through the past few days, working harder than ever, but the pressure of the trial period weighed heavily on her shoulders. Every task she completed, every decision she made felt like it could be the one that determined her future. She couldn't afford to make a mistake now. Lyra arrived at work early, as she had every day, her mind set on proving that she belonged here. The office was quiet, most of her colleagues still arriving or finishing their early tasks. Lyra set her things down at her desk, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her heart was pounding as she thought about the conversation she would have with Clara at the end of the day. Would she be offered a permanent position? Or would she be sent away, just like so many others had been before her? As she started working, Lyra focused only on the tasks in front of her. She entered data, organized files, and handled the daily operations of the company. It felt familiar now, comfortable even. The fear that had gripped her during her first few days had faded. She was no longer just an outsider. She had proven herself. She had earned her place. But there was still a nagging doubt in her mind. She had learned so much, but there was still so much she didn't know. She hadn't had the chance to truly connect with her colleagues, and though Clara had been supportive, there was still a part of Lyra that wondered if it had all been enough. By lunchtime, Lyra was feeling the exhaustion creeping in. She had been pushing herself nonstop all week, and her body was beginning to feel the strain. She sat down for a brief break, her mind racing through the possible outcomes of the day. Her fingers trembled slightly as she ate her lunch, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to lose focus now. At the end of the day, Clara called her into her office. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she walked into the room, her palms sweating. Clara was seated at her desk, looking up as Lyra entered. "Lyra," Clara began, her voice calm. "I want to talk to you about your progress here." Lyra nodded, trying to steady her nerves. She had worked so hard, and she knew she had given everything to this opportunity. But what if it wasn't enough? Clara leaned forward, her eyes studying Lyra. "I've been keeping an eye on your work, and I have to say, I'm impressed. You've really come a long way. You've learned quickly, handled everything we've thrown at you, and you've done it with determination and professionalism." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Was this it? Was she going to hear those words that would change everything? "Clara," continued, her tone softening, "I know it hasn't been easy. You've faced a lot of challenges, but you've handled them well. The team is starting to notice your efforts, and they respect you more than they did when you first arrived. It's not easy to earn that kind of respect here." Lyra felt a wave of relief wash over her. She hadn't expected this. She had worked so hard, but to hear Clara's approval felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. "So," Lyra began, her voice shaking slightly, "does this mean I've earned a permanent position?" Clara smiled warmly, a rare sight that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. "Yes, Lyra, I'm happy to say that you've earned your place here. I'm offering you a permanent position with the company. You've proven that you're capable, and I believe you have a future here." Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. She had done it, she had really done it. All the long hours, all the sacrifices, everything had led to this moment. She had earned the chance to stay. I don't know what to say," Lyra said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, I'll work hard, I promise, I won't let you down." Clara nodded. "I know you won't. You've already shown that you're dedicated. Just keep doing what you've been doing, and you'll continue to succeed." Lyra stood there for a moment, taking in the weight of Clara's words. It felt like a dream. She had made it. She had found a place where she belonged, a place where her skills and her determination were valued. And best of all, she could finally give Ari the future she had promised him. That evening, as she walked home, the world seemed brighter. The streets that had once felt cold and distant now seemed full of possibility. Lyra's thoughts drifted to Ari, who was waiting for her at home, his face lighting up every time he saw her. When she walked through the door, Ari ran to greet her, just like he always did. But today there was something different in Lyra's eyes, a sense of pride, a sense of peace. "Mama, how was your day?" Ari asked, his voice full of excitement. Lyra smiled, bending down to hug him. "It was a good day, Ari, a really good day." Ari grinned. "Did you get the job?" Lyra laughed softly, ruffling his hair. "Yes, sweetie, I got the job, and I'm going to be here for a long time. We're going to be okay." Ari's eyes widened with joy. "I knew you could do it, Mama." Lyra kissed his forehead, feeling a surge of love and relief. I couldn't have done it without you, Ari. You're my reason for everything. That night, as Lyra lay in bed, her thoughts turned to the future. She had made it. She had earned the chance to start fresh, to build a life for herself and Ari. It wasn't going to be easy, but now she knew that she could do anything she set her mind to. For the first time in a long while, Lyra allowed herself to dream of a future where she and Ari were safe, where they were no longer outsiders, a future where they had a place to call home. And as the stars shone brightly above, Lyra closed her eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring even more opportunities, more chances to prove that she had found her place in the world.